So back in 2016, there was an article titled "The Effects of a Take-Home Educational Video on Patient Knowledge Retention, Anxiety, Satisfaction, and Provider Time." This was done by
Super short title, as usual.
Right?
We like those.
This was done by Gadler, Chris, Branstein, and Schneider. And what I love about it is that they picked something pretty specific, but something that can relate to quite a lot. They looked at patients who were scheduled to have prostate cancer surgery.
One thing I think that's interesting is in the world of cancer surgeries, that's one of the ones they say is, oh, that's so easy. Like that's not a big deal. And it's an in and out type of procedure. Prostate cancer is incredibly, it's the borders are typically clean. You're not really worried about metastasis. It's one of the simpler cancers, although it does have the word cancer on it. But let's just put in perspective what they're studying. They're studying a cancer procedure, but all the surgeons probably think like, oh, this isn't the NFL. This is really rookie school for doing surgeries, right? And so it's, again, presenting that idea of not a big deal to the provider, but to the patient hearing that you have to have prostate surgery is immense. The weight of the world is on their shoulders as they go in for it.
And that's exactly what they were thinking with this research. They were thinking, okay, there has to be some kind of anxiety component. How can we intersect this and change that? So it was really simple. They just made a little take-home educational video, a couple minutes long, and they gave it to some of the patients and didn't give it to some of the other ones. And the results were pretty crazy.
Yeah. Well, what all did they find as far as the results? Like because, measuring anxiety is a tough thing. You got to get, you diving into that. And whenever you measure the anxiety, probably wasn't the moment the knife was going to cut the skin, like that's when you're scared to death, right? Or when you feel that anesthesia take over, you're wheeled in, you're super nervous, but I'm interested to see what they found.
Exactly. And I think some of the results were kind of expected and then some were not. So the top 4 things that they found was the obvious one. Of course, they ended up having a reduction in patient medical anxiety, which is great. One of my favorite ones, they found increased patient knowledge retention. So not only were they less anxious, but they understood the process more. They actually understood their medical condition more because they were forced to learn about it. It also resulted in some increased patient satisfaction, with which as a provider, what more do you want? And then my personal favorite, it actually saved post-operative provider time. A lot of the things they were having to discuss with these patients after the procedure, they didn't really have to do as much with because they already knew. Right. So I think those are all some really good points.
Yeah, I think that people underestimate that. We as providers, I think, underestimate how much more time we can get back when we also do something that serves our patients better. For example, my son just had surgery on his ear, right? And the doctor 3 different times told us, listen, a little bit of bleeding's okay. A little bit of bleeding's okay. We want it to bleed a little bit because that means fluid is flowing out, not going in and getting infected. So if you find a little bit of blood on his pillow, if he, has to dab it throughout the day, those are all positive signs, right? Now, smash cut to 2 days after surgery, I wake him up to go to school and there's a bunch of little splotches on his pillow, right? Of blood. If I hadn't had that information, I, as a very concerned parent, might have been dialing, calling the office. Oh, he's bleeding. And should I, cancel his school? Should I keep him home from school today and come into your office, et cetera, et cetera? They would have had to emergency scheduling me, right? That's one more person in that morning. I'm freaked out. He's freaked out. Everybody's freaked out. And the doctor might look at it and go, that's exactly what we expect. But what he had done instead is 3 different times, and I counted because it was so impactful. 3 different times he said a little bit of bleeding's, totally expected, and prepped us to see a little bit of blood on his pillow in a way that it wasn't a big deal, and therefore I didn't clog up his schedule. I didn't keep my son home from school. Therefore I didn't need a note to turn him back into school. If he misses for a medical appointment, we have to provide a note. He eliminated all that by having a very simple conversation, and a little bit of bleeding was okay.
It's always worth it to over communicate. And by just taking literally a couple seconds to remind you that 3 times, he saved himself, dozens of minutes after the fact. So I always tell any students I'm working with or young docs, I'm like, just take a few seconds to save you those minutes down the road.
Right.